The old farmhouse stood at the edge of Willow Hollow, a sleepy hamlet nestled deep in the rolling hills of Vermont. Its weathered clapboard siding and sagging porch gave it a weary charm, like an elderly relative who'd seen too many winters, but still had stories to tell. For Clara and Daniel Harper, it was a dream realized, a sanctuary far from the clamor of Boston, where they'd spent years clawing through corporate life. They'd traded skyscrapers for starlit skies, hoping to raise their daughter, Lily, in a place where time moved slower. Clara stood on the porch, her breath visible in the crisp October air, watching Lily chase fireflies across the sprawling lawn. The 6-year-old's laughter echoed through the dusk, a sound that warmed Clara's heart despite the chill. Daniel emerged from the house, a mug of coffee in hand, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. "She's already claiming the oak tree as her castle," he said, nodding toward Lily. Clara smiled, but her eyes lingered on the dense forest that bordered their property. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in a breeze that carried a faint, unsettling whisper. "It's perfect here," she said, though her voice held a trace of hesitation. "Quiet." "Too quiet, maybe," Daniel teased, nudging her shoulder. "You'll miss the city horns in a week." She laughed, but the forest's edge seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were watching them. Shaking off the thought, Clara turned back to the house. They'd spent months renovating the place, stripping away decades of neglect to uncover its bones, wide plank floors, a stone fireplace, and windows that framed the hills like paintings. It was theirs, a fresh start after years of stress and loss. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Clara and Daniel sat in the living room, the fire crackling softly. The house creaked, settling into the night, but each sound made Clara's shoulders tense. "Old houses talk," Daniel said, noticing her unease. "It's just the wood shifting." "I know," she replied, forcing a smile. But as she climbed the stairs to bed, she paused at the landing, listening. The house was silent, yet the air felt heavy, as if it held a secret it wasn't ready to share. It was 3:17 a.m. when Clara woke, her heart pounding. The bedroom was dark, save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the lace curtains. Daniel slept soundly beside her, his breathing steady, but something had pulled her from sleep. She lay still, straining to hear it again. A soft rhythmic scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood. She sat up, her pulse quickening. The sound was faint but persistent, coming from somewhere downstairs. Slipping out of bed, she grabbed her phone, its screen casting a cold blue light as she crept into the hallway. The house was still, the kind of stillness that felt like it was holding its breath. She hesitated at Lily's door, peeking in to see her daughter curled under a quilt, oblivious to the world. The scratching continued, pulling Clara toward the stairs. The living room was bathed in shadows, the fire long since reduced to embers. The sound was louder now, coming from the window overlooking the back porch. Clara's breath caught as she approached, her phone's light trembling in her hand. She shone it toward the glass, expecting to see a branch scraping against the pane. Instead, she saw nothing but her own reflection, and beyond it, the endless dark of the forest. The scratching stopped. Clara froze, her heart hammering. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. And that's when she saw it. A faint smudge on the outside of the window, like a handprint, its edges blurred by the night's dew. She stumbled back, her phone slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence, and she held her breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But the house remained still. She didn't tell Daniel when she returned to bed. He'd say it was her imagination, that the move had her on edge. Maybe he was right. But as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, the scratching resumed, fainter now, as if whatever was out there knew she was listening. The next morning, Clara tried to push the incident from her mind. She busied herself unpacking boxes while Lily colored at the kitchen table, humming a tune she'd made up. Daniel was outside, splitting firewood, his axe ringing through the crisp air. Life felt normal again, almost idyllic, until a knock at the door startled Clara. Standing on the porch was a man in his late 40s, his face weathered but kind, with eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Name's Tom Ellison," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Live up the road. Thought I'd welcome you folks to the Hollow." Clara shook his hand, her unease melting under his warm demeanor. "Clara Harper, thanks for stopping by." Tom glanced past her into the house, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Old place, huh? Been empty a while. You fixing it up?" "Trying to," Clara said, stepping aside to invite him in. "Coffee?" He declined politely, his eyes drifting to the forest. "Just wanted to say hi if you need anything. Tools, a hand with the fence. I'm around." He paused, then added, "Folks in the Hollow keep to themselves, but we look out for each other." Clara nodded, grateful for the gesture. Tom seemed genuine, the kind of neighbor you'd want in a place as remote as Willow Hollow. But as he turned to leave, he glanced back, his expression unreadable. "Lock your doors at night," he said, almost as an afterthought. "Woods can be unpredictable." The words lingered with Clara long after he'd gone. She told herself it was just small-town advice, but the memory of the handprint on the window made her stomach twist. Over the next few days, Clara noticed small things out of place. A book she'd left on the coffee table was now on the mantel. The back door, which she was certain she'd locked, was slightly ajar one morning. She mentioned it to Daniel, who chalked it up to forgetfulness. "We're still settling in," he said, kissing her forehead. "You're jumping at shadows." But the shadows felt alive. At night, the scratching returned, sometimes accompanied by a low hum, like a voice too distant to make out. Clara began checking the windows obsessively, ensuring every lock was secure. She even started sleeping with a kitchen knife under her pillow, a secret she kept from Daniel. Lily, too, seemed affected. She stopped playing in the backyard, saying the trees looked at her funny. When Clara pressed her, Lily whispered, "There's someone out there, Mommy. I saw them by the shed." Clara's blood ran cold. She and Daniel searched the shed, finding nothing but rusted tools and cobwebs. Still, she couldn't shake Lily's words. That night, she sat up in the living room, a flashlight in one hand and her phone in the other, watching the windows. Around midnight, she heard it again. The scratching, followed by a faint tap like a finger testing the glass. She crept to the window, her heart in her throat, but saw only darkness. No handprint this time, but the air felt charged, as if someone had just been there. A week later, the Harpers hosted a small housewarming. Tom and his wife Ellen came, along with a few other neighbors from the Hollow. The evening was warm, filled with laughter and the clink of glasses. Tom brought a homemade pie, and Ellen shared stories of the Hollow's history. Tales of old families, abandoned mines, and whispers of strange happenings in the woods. Clara listened, half amused, half uneasy, as Ellen described the wanderers, people who supposedly lived in the forest, unseen, and untraceable. Old wives' tales, Tom said, waving a hand. But his eyes didn't meet Clara's, and she noticed he kept glancing toward the windows. After the guests left, Clara and Daniel cleaned up, the house quiet except for Lily's soft snores upstairs. As Clara wiped down the kitchen counter, she heard a faint creak from the hallway. She froze, listening. The sound came again, deliberate, like someone stepping carefully to avoid detection. Her pulse quickened as she grabbed the knife from the counter and motioned for Daniel to follow. They crept toward the hallway, the air thick with tension. The creak came again, closer now, from the direction of the basement door. Clara's mind raced. Had they locked it? She couldn't remember. Daniel flicked on the hallway light, revealing nothing but the closed basement door. He opened it, shining a flashlight down the stairs. The beam caught only cobwebs and boxes, but the air was colder than it should have been, carrying a faint, sour smell. Probably just the house settling, Daniel whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Clara nodded, her grip on the knife tightening. They locked the basement door and checked every window before going to bed, but sleep eluded her. The house felt different now, like a stranger wearing a familiar face. The next night, Clara woke to a scream. It was Lily, her voice piercing the silence. Clara and Daniel bolted from bed, rushing to her room. Lily was sitting up, her eyes wide with terror, pointing at the window. "He was there," she sobbed. "He was looking at me." Clara's heart stopped. She ran to the window, but it was locked, the glass unmarred. Outside, the yard was empty, the forest a wall of darkness. Daniel pulled Lily into his arms, soothing her, but Clara saw the fear in his eyes. This wasn't just a child's nightmare. The next morning, Clara called the sheriff's office. Deputy Harris, a grizzled man with a calm demeanor, arrived within the hour. He listened to their story, his face unreadable, and walked the property. "No signs of a break-in," he said, shining his flashlight at the window. "Could be kids messing around. Happens out here sometimes." Clara wanted to believe him, but Lily's fear was too real, too raw. That afternoon, she and Daniel installed motion sensor lights around the house and a new lock on the basement door. But the precautions felt futile, like trying to hold back a tide with a bucket. 5 nights later, the house felt alive with menace. Clara hadn't slept properly in days, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. She sat in the living room, the knife now a permanent fixture in her hand, listening to the night. Daniel was upstairs with Lily, who refused to sleep alone. The motion sensor lights hadn't triggered, but the air was heavy, charged with an unspoken threat. At 2:43 a.m., the basement door rattled. It was soft at first, like someone testing the lock, then louder, more insistent. Clara's breath caught as she crept toward the hallway, the knife trembling in her hand. The rattling stopped, replaced by a low guttural hum that seemed to come from inside the walls. She froze, her mind screaming at her to run, to grab Lily and Daniel and flee, but her feet were rooted to the floor. The hum grew louder, forming words she couldn't quite make out. She inched closer to the basement door, her flashlight shaking in her other hand. As she reached for the knob, the door flew open, revealing a figure in the darkness below. He was tall, his face obscured by shadow, but his eyes glinted in the flashlight's beam, cold and unyielding. In his hand was a rusted crowbar, its tip gleaming with intent. Clara screamed, stumbling back. The figure didn't move, just stood there, his presence a violation of everything she held dear. "Get out," she shouted, her voice breaking. The figure tilted his head as if studying her, then spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You don't belong here." Before she could respond, Daniel's footsteps thundered down the stairs. He grabbed a fireplace poker, standing between Clara and the figure. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking but firm. The figure didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back, melting into the basement's darkness. Daniel slammed the door shut, locking it, but the sound of footsteps retreating down the stairs echoed in Clara's ears. They called the sheriff, who arrived with 2 deputies. They searched the basement, finding a hidden crawl space behind a stack of boxes. Inside were blankets, empty food cans, and a notebook filled with sketches of the house and their family. The sheriff's investigation revealed a chilling truth. The man in the basement was Elias Kane, a drifter who'd been living in the Hollow's abandoned mines for years. He'd been watching the Harpers since they moved in, slipping into the house through the crawl space to steal small items. Keys, a scarf, a photo of Lily. The notebook detailed their routines, their habits, their lives. He hadn't just been stealing. He'd been studying them, waiting for something Clara couldn't bear to imagine. The sheriff sealed the crawl space and increased patrols, but Elias was gone, vanished into the forest. The Harpers couldn't stay. They moved to a hotel, then to a new town, but the fear followed them. Every creak, every shadow was a reminder of the man who turned their home into a prison. Clara still checks the locks at night, her hand lingering on the doorknob, listening for the whisper of the Hollow. She knows Elias is out there, somewhere watching. And she knows that no lock, no distance, can keep the darkness at bay forever. If this story sent shivers down your spine, let me know your thoughts below. Stay vigilant, lock your doors, and remember, the shadows are always closer than you think.